the scent of stale mustard oil, and cooling red sandstone fills my nose before my eyes even open. It is a heavy, earthy smell, the signature of fede por sikri in the dark hours before dawn. My hip aches where the woven cotton webbing of the charpai has sagged during the night, pressing my side against the wooden frame. I lie still for a moment, listening. The only sound is the rhythmic, wheezing breath of my father sleeping on the cot across the room, and the distant, muffled bark of a pariah dog patrolling the dusty streets. I roll onto my back, pushing aside the heavy quilt. The air is sharp and cold, a stark contrast to the heat that will bake these stone walls by midday. The light is barely a gray smudge against the intricate stone latticework of the high window. But I know the time by the temperature of the floor stones. It is time to rise. My feet find the floor, and the shock of the cold stone travels up my shins. I shiver, pulling the quilt briefly around my shoulders like a shawl before discarding it. I move to the corner of the room where a brass ewer and basin wait. The water inside has lost the warmth of the previous day, sitting stagnant and chilly. I pour a small amount into my cupped hand, splashing my face 3 times. The water smells faintly of the river, silty and mineral. I reach for a neem twig sitting on the low shelf. I chew the end until the fibers fray into a coarse brush, the bitter, astringent juice flooding my mouth. It wakes me faster than the cold water. I scrub my teeth methodically, spitting the foam into the drain in the corner of the courtyard. Then rinse my mouth until the bitterness fades to a clean, sharp numbness. Dressing is a ritual of layers, a construction of dignity required for one who enters the Imperial complex. I first step into my undergarment, a simple loincloth of unbleached cotton, tying it securely. Next come the trousers, the pajama. They are cut from white cotton, loose at the waist, but tapering aggressively toward the ankle. I sit on the edge of the bed to work my feet through the tight cuffs. The fabric bunches around my calves in the churidar style, forming ringlets of cloth that will cushion my legs during the long hours of sitting cross-legged on the workshop floor. Then the jama. It is a tunic of fine muslin, sheer enough that holding it up to the lamplight reveals the weave. I slide my arms through the long sleeves. Because I serve in the court of Emperor Akbar, I tie the tunic on the right side of my chest, securing the fabric tapes with double knots. The skirt of the jama falls to my knees, flaring slightly. The fabric is stiff with starch, rustling like dry leaves with every movement. I wrap the patka, a long sash of embroidered cloth, around my waist. I pull it tight, compressing my stomach. This is not just fashion. The pressure helps sustain my posture during the 10 hours of painting ahead. Finally, the turban. I take the long length of indigo-dyed cloth and anchor one end in my teeth My hands move in a practiced rhythm, winding the fabric around my head, folding and tucking, building the volume carefully so it sits balanced and firm. I tuck the end tail in, smoothing the fabric over my ears. I apply a small amount of surma, a black coal powder, to the rims of my eyelids using a glass rod. It stings briefly, then cools, sharpening my vision and protecting my eyes from the glare of the sun. I step out into the small central courtyard of our home. The sky above is turning the color of a bruised plum. My wife is already awake, crouching by the clay chulha stove. The smell of burning cow dung cakes and wood smoke hangs low in the air, mixing with the aroma of wheat flour. She hands me a metal platter without a word. Breakfast is simple but substantial. There is a round of unleavened bread, a roti, hot and puffed from the fire, possessed of a charred, nutty scent. Beside it sits a small bowl of thick yogurt, crusted with a layer of cream, and a wedge of mango pickle that smells of mustard seeds and fennel. I tear the bread, scooping up the cold, tart yogurt. The contrast between the hot, dry bread and the cool, slick dairy is the first true pleasure of the day. I eat quickly, chewing thoroughly. I drink water from a copper loda, the metal imparting a slight acidic tang to the liquid. I leave the house just as the sun begins to bleed gold onto the horizon. The streets of the capital are waking up. The ground is hard-packed earth, swept clean, but already accumulating the dust of the day. I walk past the high walls of red sandstone, the material that defines this city. The air is filled with the groans of camels and the heavy, rhythmic thud of an elephant passing in the distance, likely heading to the Imperial stables. Water carriers, the bisties, trudge along with their heavy goatskin bags sloshing against their hips, sprinkling water on the dust to keep it down. The smell of wet earth rises up to meet the smell of wood smoke. I walk with my hands clasped behind my back, protecting my fingers. My hands are my livelihood. A jammed finger or a cut would mean starvation. I navigate the crowds of merchants setting up their stalls, avoiding the baskets of onions and piles of bright marigolds. I arrive at the Karkhana, the Imperial workshop. It is a large, high-ceilinged hall within the palace complex. The light here is different. The architects have designed the windows to admit the northern light, which is consistent and shadowless, crucial for our work. The air inside smells of binding gum, animal glue, and the metallic tang of minerals. I remove my leather shoes at the entrance, placing them in a row beside dozens of others. The stone floor is cool through my socks. I walk to my designated spot, a low wooden desk slightly angled, surrounded by cushions. I do not sit yet. First, I must pay respects to the master of the atelier, the Ustad. He sits at the head of the room, an elderly man with a beard like spun silver, already inspecting a sketch with a magnifying glass. I bow low, touching my hand to my forehead. He acknowledges me with a grunt and a wave of his hand. My workspace is set exactly as I left it. My tools are my extensions. I sit cross-legged, adjusting the folds of my jama so they do not bunch under my thighs. I take a moment to breathe, centering my mind. The chaos of the street must be walled off. Here there is only the page. My first task is not painting, but preparation. I pick up a seashell containing a small amount of dried pigment, lapis lazuli, ground to a fine dust. It is the blue of the deep ocean. I add a few drops of water and a binder made from gum arabic. Using my finger, I begin to grind the mixture against the smooth interior of the shell. I rub it in slow, circular motions. The grit must be completely eliminated. If even a single grain of coarse mineral remains, it will tear the paper and ruin weeks of work. I grind for what feels like an hour, feeling the texture change from sandy paste to a smooth, oily liquid. My fingertip is stained a deep royal blue. Once the pigment is ready, I cover it with a damp cloth to keep it from drying. I turn my attention to the paper. It is a wasli, a board made by gluing together several sheets of paper with toxic paste to prevent insect damage. I pick up my burnisher, a smooth, egg-shaped agate stone set into a wooden handle. I place the paper face down on a polished slab of marble. I begin to rub the back of the paper with the agate stone. This is the sound of the workshop. The rhythmic shhh of 50 men burnishing paper. I press down with the weight of my shoulder, driving the stone across the fibers. I am compressing the paper, polishing it until the surface is as smooth as glass. The friction generates heat. I can feel the paper getting warm under my hand. This process, the gyudai, is essential. If the paper is not burnished enough, the pigments will sink into the fibers and look dull. If it is burnished too much, the surface will become brittle. I check the surface by holding it at an angle to the light. It gleams like porcelain. The project before me is a folio for the Akbarnama, the chronicle of the emperor's life. I am a junior artist, so I am not responsible for the composition. That was drawn by the master Basawin. My task is Rang Amesy, the coloring. The scene depicts a hunt. The master's drawing is faint. A delicate web of black ink lines showing the emperor on horseback, a cheetah leaping from a cart, and the terrified gaze of a gazelle. I select a brush. It is made from the hair of a squirrel's tail. It is so fine that it terminates in a single hair. I dip it into a pot of white pigment made from lead. I test the consistency on my thumbnail. It flows smoothly, opaque and creamy. I begin with the emperor's turban. I lay down the base color, a flat wash of orange. I do not paint with strokes. I fill with tiny, microscopic dots, thousands of them, merging to create a solid field of color. My breathing slows. I hold my breath when the brush touches the paper, exhaling only when I lift it. My hand rests on a bridge of wood to keep my palm off the artwork. The silence of the room is heavy, broken only by the scratching of brushes and the shifting of limbs. A servant moves silently among us, refilling our water pots. The light shifts imperceptibly across the floor. After an hour of laying down the orange, I switch to the malachite green for the background foliage. The mineral is gritty, difficult to work with. I have to stir the shell constantly. I paint the leaves of a banyan tree in the background. I am careful to stay exactly within the master's ink lines. To go outside the line is an amateur's error. To leave a gap between the color and the line is laziness. My eyes begin to strain. I stop and look out the window at the distant blue sky to reset my focus. I pick up the agate burnisher again. After every layer of paint, I must burnish the page again, face down, to melt the pigment into the paper fibers. Paint, burnish, paint, burnish. It is a cycle of application and compression. The painting is not just an image on the surface. It is becoming a physical inlay of precious minerals. I reach for a piece of gold leaf. It is kept between sheets of leather. I breathe on the leather to create a slight moisture, then lift the gold with a bamboo tweezer. The gold is so thin it will disintegrate if I touch it with my skin. I apply a glue made of sugar and water to the hilt of the emperor's sword on the page. I lay the gold down. It flutters like a living thing before settling into the glue. Later, I will polish this gold with a bear's tooth until it shines like the sun. But for now, it sits flat and dull. My stomach gives a quiet rumble, reminding me that the morning is passing. The Ustad stands up and walks through the rows of artists. The rhythm of work stutters slightly as he approaches. He stops behind me. I freeze, the brush hovering over the water pot. I can feel his shadow fall over my shoulder. He leans down, his breath smelling of cardamom. The orange of the turban is too flat, he murmurs. It needs volume. Use the carmine wash to shade the folds. Do not be afraid of the shadow. Yes, Ustad, I whisper. He taps the paper with a long fingernail. And the eye of the gazelle. It is too human. Make it wilder. More fear. He moves on. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I look at the gazelle. It is the size of a lentil. I clean my brush and mix a microscopic amount of lamp black. I lean in until my nose is almost touching the paper. I add a single dot of white to the black pupil of the gazelle's eye. Suddenly, the animal looks alive, terrified, wet with life. I straighten my back, which cracks audibly. The sun has climbed high now. The light in the room has shifted from the cool gray of morning to a bright, diffused white. The sounds of the palace outside have grown louder shouts of guards, the clatter of pots from the Imperial kitchen, the distant chime of a bell marking the hour. I wipe my brush on a rag stained with 1,000 colors. The morning is gone. The real labor of the day has only just begun. The sun has climbed high enough now to banish the forgiving, cool shadows of the morning. In the Imperial Tasvir Khana, the light does not flood in uncontrolled. That would be disastrous. Instead, it filters through high, latticed stone screens, the jollies breaking into soft, diffused bars that illuminate the dust motes dancing in the heavy air. We do not work in direct sunlight, which would blind us and dry our pigments too quickly. But in this expansive, steady glow that reveals the truth of every line, my workspace is a small territory defined by the span of my knees. I sit cross-legged on a woven reed mat, my spine curved into the familiar question mark of my trade. On my right knee, raised slightly higher than the left, rests the wooden board, the takti, upon which my work is clamped. I am no longer a mere apprentice grinding stones. I have been entrusted with a likeness. The subject is a minor courtier, a man of some influence in the revenue department, who wishes to be remembered standing with a falcon. The master, Ustad Mansur, laid out the composition yesterday, drawing the faint, skeletal outline in charcoal before brushing it away with a squirrel tail, leaving only the ghost of the form. I have spent the last 3 hours fixing that ghost with a brush dipped in black soot ink. My tool is an extension of my nervous system. It is a brush of kitten hair set into a quill of a pigeon, trimmed so precisely that it terminates in a single, defiant filament. I hold it not like a dagger, but close to the tip, resting the side of my hand against the paper to steady the pulse that beats in my fingertips. The technique is pardas. I am shading the hollow of the courtier's cheek. I do not paint a shadow, I construct it. I lay down thousands of microscopic dots, one after the other. It requires a suspension of breath. I inhale, hold the air in the cage of my ribs, and in that stillness, I strike the paper 3, 4, 5 times. Exhale, inhale, strike. The shadow grows not like a stain, but like a gathering dusk, possessing a texture that velvet would envy. My eyes burn. It is a specific, dry heat behind the lids that warns of strain, but I cannot stop. The vermilion of the man's turban is still wet, and I must burnish the gold of his sash before the humidity changes. Beside me on the floor lie my clam shells. These act as our palettes. In the hollow of one rests a pool of lapis lazuli, ground so fine it looks like a piece of the midnight sky melted down. In another, there is malachite for the green of the tunic, third, a dangerous, bright yellow made from the urine of cows, fed only on mango leaves. The smell of the atelier is a complex perfume. The metallic tang of copper green verdigris, the sweet, rotting scent of the animal glue binder, the musk of saffron, and the overriding, earthy aroma of gum arabic. Your line wavers on the falcon's hood, a voice murmurs. I do not jump. We are trained against sudden movements. I look up to see the senior artist, the Ustad, standing over me. He does not sit. He drifts between us like a cloud. He points with a long, stained finger. The bird is tense, he says softly. It is about to take flight. Your line suggests it is sleeping. Use the squirrel hair. Make the line jagged, alive. I nod, bowing my head. There is no argument here. We are not creators of individual fancy. We are the hands of the emperor. If the emperor sees the bird, he must feel its tension. I reach for the agate burnisher, a smooth, polished stone set in a wooden handle. Before I can correct the line, I must smooth the paper fibers that have risen from the moisture of the paint. I flip the painting over, placing it face down on a polished slab of marble, and rub the back of the paper with the agate stone. The sound is a rhythmic scritch, 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 a friction that compresses the layers of the wasli paper into a single porcelain-like surface. This is the heartbeat of the workshop, the sound of 50 men burnishing, grinding, and breathing. The gong sounds from the Tasvir Khana, the drum house at the city gate. It is midday. The spell breaks. A collective sigh ripples through the room. Brushes are rinsed in copper bowls of water, turning the liquid into murky rainbows. We cover our work with clean cotton cloths to protect it from the dust and the flies that grow bold in the heat. My legs protest as I unfold them, the blood rushing back into my ankles with a prickly heat. I stand, stretching my arms toward the vaulted ceiling, hearing the crack of my joints. We move out of the atelier and into the shaded arcade of the courtyard. The heat outside is a physical weight, a wall of dry fire that hits us the moment we step past the heavy curtains. This is the Lu, the summer wind of Hindustan that cracks lips and dries water skins. But here, in the shadow of the red sandstone arches, the air is tempered by the smell of wet vetiver mats hung over the openings, sprayed constantly with water by low-caste water carriers. Lunch is a communal affair, but strictly stratified. The masters retire to their own cushions. The apprentices huddle near the kitchens. I sit with the journeymen, the painters of rank who have not yet achieved the title of Ustad. We sit in a circle on a spread dastarquin, a long cloth that smells of turmeric and yesterday's washing. A servant brings a large brass platter, steam rising from it in the heavy air. Today, the meal is substantial, for the emperor believes that fine work requires fine fuel. There is a mound of rice, yellowed with saffron and studded with raisins. Beside it, a bowl of halim, meat slowly cooked with lentils and pounded wheat until it is a thick, glutinous paste that sticks to the ribs. There are stacks of naan, the bread scorched and bubbled from the clay oven, brushed with ghee. I tear a piece of the naan, using only my right hand, and scoop up a portion of the halim. The texture is rich and heavy, the taste sharp with ginger and green chilies that prickle the sweat on my forehead. We eat in a focused silence at first, the hunger of the mornings, intense concentration, demanding satisfaction. The Portuguese priests brought a new engraving to the court this morning, whispers Rizal, a colorist who sits to my left. He wipes a smear of grease from his beard. Another Madonna, I ask, chewing slowly. A martyrdom, Rizal replies, his eyes wide. Saint Cecilia. The perspective. It is like looking through a window. The figures fade into the back. They do not stack up like ours. The emperor was fascinated. He held it for a long time. It is a trick of the eye, grunts Hamid, an older man whose hands are permanently stained blue from indigo. They paint shadows where there is no form. It looks like mud. There is no light in their work, only darkness. But the emperor likes it, Rizal insists, reaching for a slice of pickled mango. The sour, spicy tang of the pickle cuts through the richness of the meat. He asked Ustad Basawin to copy the drapery. I drink from an earthen cup of cool water, scented with rose. The water is stored in porous clay pots that sweat in the wind, keeping the contents chilled. The conversation makes me uneasy. We are masters of the line, of the pure color that glows like a jewel. These foreign pictures, these heavy, dark etchings, they are dull. Yet, if Akbar likes them, we must learn to like them. We must learn to paint the heavy shadows, to make our figures look round and heavy, rather than light and ethereal. I finish the meal with a wedge of melon, brought down from the cooler climes of Kabul. It is sweet, watery, and dissolves the grease in my mouth. The luxury of it is not lost on me. A peasant in the fields, outside the city walls, eats millet bread and onions. I eat the fruit of kings because my hand can draw a line that does not waver. After the meal, there is a lull. The heat is at its zenith. The city outside the walls falls silent. Even the hawkers and the elephants seek shade. We do not sleep. There is too much to do, but the pace slows. We return to the atelier, but we do not paint immediately. Digestion draws blood from the brain. The hand is not steady enough for the single hair brush. Instead, we prepare. I sit back on my mat, but this time I pull the heavy stone mortar between my legs. I take a chunk of cinnabar, the heavy, toxic red mineral. I place it in the mortar. For the next hour, I will do nothing but grind. The pestle moves in a circular rhythm. Grind, crush, grind. It is a hypnotic, mindless labor that allows the mind to wander while the body works. The pigment must be ground until it feels like silk between the fingers. If it is gritty, it will ruin the painting. The sound of the room changes. The silence of the morning is replaced by the dull, rhythmic clatter of stone on stone. 20 men grinding malachite, lapis, cinnabar, and gold. The air fills with the faint, metallic taste of mineral dust. I watch the Ustad across the room. He is examining a piece of charba, a transparent deer skin used for tracing. He places it over a finished portrait, pricking holes along the outline with a needle. He is creating a stencil to make copies. The emperor wants this image distributed to his governors. Even art is administration here. My shoulder aches, a dull throb under the scapula. I shift my weight, the reed mat impressing its pattern into my ankles. The cinnabar in my mortar is turning into a bright, blood-red powder. I will need to mix it with gum arabic and water soon, testing the consistency on the back of my hand. Through the stone lattice, I hear the distant cry of a peacock from the royal gardens. It is a harsh, screaming sound that cuts through the heat. It reminds me that outside this cool, dark room, the world is blazing. But in here, in the smell of glue and stone, time is measured not by the sun, but by the slow, deliberate accumulation of beauty. I add a drop of water to the red dust and continue to grind. The afternoon stretches out, long and red and quiet. The light is the first master I serve, and it is the first to dismiss me. As the sun begins to dip below the red sandstone ridges of the palace walls, the quality of the illumination inside the Tasvir Khana shifts. The bright, unforgiving clarity of midday, which allowed me to trace the individual hairs of a hunting falcon's breast, softens into a gold-dusted haze. It is a beautiful light for poetry, but a treacherous one for painting. To continue now would be to invite mistakes. And in the service of Emperor Akbar, a mistake is not merely an error of the hand, but a failure of the soul. I exhale, a long, ragged breath that seems to deflate my entire posture. For the last 6 hours, I have sat cross-legged on the floor cushion, my spine curved like a bow, my face hovering mere inches from the paper. Now, as I straighten my back, the vertebrae pop and grind, a familiar chorus of protest. My right hand, the hand that holds the universe of the court within its grip, is cramped into a claw. I have to massage the base of the thumb with my left hand, kneading the muscle until the blood returns. The workshop is quieting down. Around me, 30 other artists are engaging in the same ritual of cessation. There is the clink of ceramic water pots, the rustle of burnished paper, and the soft murmur of fatigue. We do not speak much. We have spent the day in a shared trance, and the transition back to the world of men requires a slow re-entry. I turn my attention to my tools. They are more valuable to me than my own clothing. First, the brushes. I take the finest one, a brush made from the hair of a squirrel's tail, so delicate it terminates in a single hair. I dip it into a small bowl of clean water, swirling it gently to release the residue of lamp black and gum arabic. I watch the dark cloud bloom in the water, a ghost of the lines I laid down today. I reshape the tip with my lips, tasting the faint, metallic tang of the pigment, and place it carefully in its bamboo case. Next, the mussel shell containing the gold paint. It must be covered immediately to prevent dust from settling on the precious metal. I place a small damp cloth over the pigments, the lapis lazuli, the malachite, the vermilion, to keep them from drying out completely before morning. Finally, I take the burnishing stone, a smooth, heavy agate shaped like an egg, and wipe it down with a piece of silk. These objects are the extensions of my will. To neglect them is to neglect myself. I stand up, my knees protesting the movement. I am wearing a jama of unbleached cotton, tied under the right armpit in the manner of the court, and a sash around my waist. The fabric is damp with sweat at the small of my back. The air in the atelier is thick with the smell of binders, glue, and the perfumed oil used by the master artists. I bow to the ustad, the master of the guild, who sits on a slightly elevated dais. He nods, his eyes already closed, perhaps envisioning the composition for tomorrow. Walking out of the palace complex is a journey between worlds. I pass through the towering arches of red stone, the geometry of the architecture, so precise it feels divine. The ground beneath my slippers is still warm, radiating the absorbed heat of the sun. As I exit the Imperial precinct and enter the city of Fadepur, the silence of the court is shattered by the roar of the populace. The evening bazaar is an assault on the senses. After hours of focusing on a space no larger than a palm leaf, the chaos of the street feels overwhelming. The air here smells of roasting meat, wood smoke, dried dung, and the pungent sweat of camels. I navigate through the crowd, clutching my small bag of personal sketches close to my chest. A water carrier, his goatskin bag dripping a dark trail in the dust, pushes past me. A group of soldiers, their steel helmets gleaming under the torchlight, laugh raucous laughs that rattle in their chests. I keep my head down. I am a servant of the Emperor. Yes, but here in the streets, I am just a man with ink-stained fingers. I stop at a stall to buy betel leaf. The vendor, a man with teeth stained red from his own wares, knows me. He prepares the pan quickly, slathering the green heart-shaped leaf with lime paste and catechu, sprinkling chopped areca nut and sweet spices before folding it into a tight triangle. I place it in my mouth, and and the explosion of flavor, sharp, sweet, astringent, wakes me up. It is a small luxury, costing only a few dams, but it signals the end of my servitude and the beginning of my own time. My home is located in the lower quarters, down a labyrinth of narrow, winding alleys that cool rapidly as the sun vanishes. It is a modest structure of brick and plaster, indistinguishable from its neighbors. But for the blue tile I have embedded above the doorframe, I push open the heavy wooden door and step into the small central courtyard. The sudden quiet is a balm. The house is centered around this open space where the family lives, breathes, and works. A singular neem tree grows in the corner, its leaves rustling in the evening breeze, acting as a natural repellent against the mosquitoes that rise with the dark. My wife is squatting by the clay hearth in the corner of the courtyard, blowing into a hollow bamboo tube to coax the embers into flame. The smell of baking bread, chapatis, fills the enclosure. It is the smell of safety. She looks up, her face illuminated by the sudden flare of the fire, and offers a tired but genuine smile. She pulls the end of her veil over her head, a habitual gesture of modesty, even within our own walls. "You are late," she says, but there is no accusation in her voice, only observation. "The Emperor's eye is insatiable," I reply, reciting the phrase that has become our household motto. I go to the water jar in the corner. I strip off my sash and the upper part of my jama, letting the cool evening air hit my skin. I take a brass loda, fill it with water, and begin to wash. This is the most important ablution of the day. I scrub my hands with earth and ash, trying to remove the stains of the day's labor. The blue of the lapis is stubborn. It has settled deep into the whorls of my thumbprint, marking me permanently. I splash water on my face, washing away the dust of the bazaar and the tension of the court. My son, a boy of 10 years, emerges from the inner room. He carries a small wooden board covered in chalk paste. He has been practicing his aleph and ba, the letters of the alphabet, mimicking the calligraphy that adorns the borders of the manuscripts I illustrate. "Show me," I say, drying my face with a rough cotton towel. He holds up the board. The curves are shaky, the proportions slightly off, but the intent is there. He has the steady hand of an artist, even if he does not yet have the discipline. I touch his shoulder. "Keep your wrist locked." The movement comes from the elbow, not the fingers. We will practice the curve of the noon tomorrow. He beams, satisfied with the critique. In this house, art is not a hobby. It is the trade that puts rice in our bellies and a roof over our heads. Dinner is served on a low wooden stool in the courtyard. We sit on the ground, on woven mats. The meal is simple but hearty. There is a brass bowl of dal, thick with lentils and tempered with cumin and garlic fried in ghee. There is a side of spinach cooked with mustard seeds. And there is the stack of hot chapatis, slightly charred at the edges, just the way I like them. We eat in silence for the first few minutes, the hunger of the day taking precedence. I tear a piece of bread, scoop up the lentils, and eat. The texture is rough and comforting. The taste is of the earth. It grounds me. At the court, I paint feasts of peacock and venison, served on gold platters for the eyes of kings. Here I eat lentils on brass, and I am content. After the meal, my wife brings a small bowl of sugar crystals and fennel seeds to cleanse the palate. The oil lamps are lit now, small clay diyas, with cotton wicks floating in mustard oil. They cast long, dancing shadows against the white plaster walls. This is the time for the household to breathe. My wife sits on the charpai, the string caught, mending a tear in my son's tunic. The needle flashes in the lamplight. I recline against a bolster pillow, my limbs heavy. I pull a small book from my sash, not a court commission, but a personal collection of verses I have copied out. I read aloud, my voice low. It is a ghazal by Amir Khusrau. The words speak of the beloved's eyes and the torment of separation. My wife does not look up from her sewing, but I see the slight softening of her expression. She understands the language of the court, the Persian metaphors, even if she does not speak it fluently. It is a bridge between my world of high culture and our domestic reality. But the fatigue is a tide that cannot be held back. The eyes that have strained to see the microscopic details of a butterfly's wing are now burning. I close the book. It is time, I say. We prepare for sleep. In the heat of the season, we sleep in the open courtyard to catch the breeze. The charpais are light, frames of wood strung with tightly woven rope webbing. We drag them away from the walls to avoid the radiating heat. I lay out my bedding, a thin cotton mattress stuffed with old rags, and a white sheet. I shake the sheet vigorously to dislodge any scorpions or spiders that might have sought refuge in the folds. It is a necessary caution. My son is already asleep on his cot, curled into a ball, his breathing a soft rhythm that joins the night sounds of the city. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. From the rooftop of a neighbor's house, I hear the low murmur of conversation and the bubble of a hookah. I lie down, the ropes of the charpai conforming to my tired body. I stare up at the square of sky, framed by the walls of my courtyard. The stars are out, brilliant and piercing. My mind drifts back to the painting on my desk at the Tasvir Khana, the portrait of the nobleman. I think of the fold of his turban. I am not satisfied with the shading of the silk. The indigo wash was too heavy. I will have to lift it tomorrow with a damp brush and reapply a thinner glaze. And the background, it needs a touch of gold leaf to signify the divine light of the Emperor's favor. I turn onto my side, pulling the sheet up to my shoulder. The smell of the mustard oil from the dying lamp lingers in the air. My hands, the tools of my trade, are curled against my chest. I flex the fingers one last time, feeling the stiffness, hoping they will be nimble again by dawn. The call of the night watchman echoes from the street outside. The strike of his staff against the cobblestones, marking the passing of the first watch of the night. But the sound is distant, fading. The red stone city, the demanding emperor, the endless grind of the pigment stone, all of it dissolves. The blackness of the sleep is not like the black of the lamp soot I paint with. It is textureless. It is deep. It is the only canvas where I do not have to work. I close my eyes and the world goes dark.